Do you have 10 minutes? Of course you do. Why don't you spend them with me for one of my Tales for Tired Adults? Perfect for when you are winding down from a busy day, or if you are finding a way to avoid your phone first thing in the morning. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can find the rest of these 10 tales on my YouTube channel. Tale 6. The Grapefruit Tree. Once upon a time, there was a woman who did not feel quite like herself. Like many women, she had felt this developing in small increments for a very long time, but tried to put it out of her mind. After all, there were so many jobs to do and errands to run. The children needed feeding, as did her husband, and as an afterthought, herself. And so time passed, measured by meals and errands, until the feeling became harder and harder to ignore. On one day she might begin the morning firmly intending to organise the laundry, only to lose herself thereafter, coming to crouched in the corner of the bedroom, examining the dust motes in the air with preternatural focus. Another day she might simply lie in bed a little longer one morning, only to find the clock pointing urgently to 12 when she finally rose. And sometimes, though she pretended not to know it, she might glance in the mirror and see everything except for her own reflection. Amongst a feeling of unnerving distress, which trickled into the back of her consciousness as a permanent ambient hum, there was one thing which gave her pleasure despite all of this: the grapefruit tree. The tree had stood high on the hill overlooking her home for the whole of her life and more. As was the custom of the island, it had been planted by her great-great-grandmother many years ago, whilst her great-great-grandfather was building their home. Each home had its own grapefruit tree, and each day the family would traipse up the hill, gather their daily fruit, and return home to enjoy it together, even those who hated the flavour. After all, if you have ever had grapefruit, then you will know how very bitter it can be. But consider, if you were to eat it every day for the whole of your life, you would not find it bitter at all, just as plain water becomes delicious to the thirsty, and blood becomes delectable even to the most selective of vampires. Meanwhile, she continued to feel stranger and stranger, less like herself and more like a lost mannequin coming to life during an unknown manoeuvre. But she reassured herself that she had her family, however disinterested they may be. Her home, however much it was filled by the ticking of the clock. And, above all, the grapefruit tree. One day her sister visited their home and frowned angrily at her sister's loose countenance.
"What's wrong with you?"
she said.
"Go and see the island's physician immediately."
The woman picked up her bag and went. The physician undertook a cursory investigation, lifting this eyelid and the other, checking for a heartbeat. He rolled his own eyes when he heard that she felt unusual, tired despite sleeping, hungry despite eating, empty despite of her life being so full. Yet when she began to shamefully list all of those reasons her life should be perfect, her house, her family, the grapefruit tree, his eyes lit up.
"It is the grapefruit from the grapefruit tree which traps you in such misery. It's something I cannot explain, but I advise you to abstain."
The woman was astonished. Surely the grapefruit tree could not be to blame. She wondered what her great-great-grandmother would say had she heard those words. The fruit of my labour poisoning my kin. Unhappy with his opinion, the woman continued on to see the island's herbalist, who gestured with his shears to the top of the hill. The botanist and the alchemist also shook their heads, and finally the shopkeeper, whom she had always trusted, repeated,
"It is the grapefruit from the grapefruit tree, which traps you in such misery. It's something I cannot explain, but I advise you to abstain."
Ridiculous, she muttered to herself as she returned home. They are fools. She stopped on the way to collect the dry cleaning, the food shopping, and the children, all of which she hung about her person as lightly as fruit from a bough. The tang of that morning's grapefruit still lingered on her tongue, and to consider living without that familiar flavour, it was unimaginable. Still, came the warning from the back of her mind, if all five said it, it must be true. She shook her head roughly, dislodging a child who slipped to the floor. If there was one thing she had learned over the past few months, it was that that voice was not always to be trusted, for it often took lies for truth and love for hate. The next morning she woke up first as usual, made the coffee as usual, shrugged off a hug from her husband and a smearing kiss from her son, and let a small smile slip from her face to her daughters and back again, and set about forming a plan for the day.
"It's good to see you up and about,"
said her husband begrudgingly. He had found her latest mood to be quite frustrating.
"Coming to the tree? Next door or heading up the hill now?"
Without thinking of it, the woman simply shook her head.
"Suit yourself,"
he said with a huff, gesturing to the children to follow him.
"Bring yours back."
The woman nodded stiffly as she watched them leave from the back door, walk through the gate, and clamber up the hillside arm in arm. She squinted her eyes. Even from that distance, she could see that the tree had borne a glut of fruit that morning. She imagined holding the soft, warm sphere in her hand like an obscured snow globe. The pale and dimpled skin, coral and leathery, yielding to her fruit knife to let out the fragrant and incipient juices. The rich segments, sharp to her uncovered skin like spice, pith and pin like kith and kin to the fruit within. And she was not to have it. It was only later that day that she was faced with a problem which struck her with unreasonable terror. There in the fruit bowl rested her grapefruit, balloon-faced and friendly. Whatever could be done with it? She could not put it in the bin, it would be seen. It could not go out into the garden, even beneath a bush. Its flavour was too strong, it would be tasted on the air. She wondered and worried and worked herself up into quite a state, so that soon it was 5 p.m, and not one chore had been completed, no errands run, and there was only time to hide the fruit in her underwear drawer and wipe the surfaces. "Whatever will he say?" she asked the silent kitchen. Not even the clock ticked back. And to make matters worse, she did not yet even feel any better. In the end, he saw nothing, and so said nothing. Soon after, it became a secret routine. He and the children collected the fruit and ate it together as a happy family, and meanwhile hers was left in the bowl. All too quickly, the working week was through, and she had 5 grapefruit crammed into the drawer and no long-term plan.
"New perfume?"
he said on the 5th night. She replied. and you still feel exactly the same, whispered the voice at the back of her head. The next day, the idea occurred to her so promptly that she wondered why she had not thought of it before. Tell him the truth? Ask for help? No, not at all. Instead, she gathered up the grapefruit in a pillowcase, walked breathlessly to the top of the hill, being out of practice, and dumped out the bag unceremoniously, letting the 5 fruit roll loosely into the roots of the tree. For a moment, she feared the fruit might even roll away, back down the hill, back to her kitchen bowl. Yet they were dented by rot and fell slack on the ground. She nodded with pleasure. It was a solution of sorts. Fruit falls and rots, she promised herself. It will not look strange. And she gazed across the island, looking out at the bright sunlight and feeling the change of air across her face, like the freshness of a clean shirt.
Hello,
cried a voice from behind her, shocking her upright. Hello?
It's been a while since I've seen you up here. We were all joking that you were dead.
The woman wondered what her neighbour was doing up here so late in the day, failing to realise that the neighbour was thinking much the same.
Well, how are you?
Came a voice from behind her. It was the shopkeeper's wife.
Well, hello.
Another delighted voice sprung up like a flower. The woman stared, thinking hard. I must get away, she thought. My clothes, what a mess. I can't say when I last washed my hair. She failed to notice that the other women looked much the same. Oh, when will I feel better? All of this, for what? I wish I could launch myself off this blasted hillside.
Stay, don't worry,
said the neighbour, taking her arm.
Look around, what do you see?
The woman looked. Women, she thought, as far as that eye can see. Some stood beside their designated tree. Some chatted to friends and neighbours. They tittered and squawked like roosting birds. Beyond, the circular hillside garlanded with trees as ever, and the great drinking-glass valley of the village in the centre of the island, where school bells and traffic lights rung busily.
No,
whispered the shopkeeper's wife.
Look at the ground.
There, around the base of every tree, like fallen baubles or dropped stars, she saw a litter of partly rotten grapefruit. Some trees had only 1 or 2 at their roots, some had 5, and some were surrounded by hundreds, heaped up into compost, and already sprouting small green tendrils as they bore new life. The woman looked back in amazement.
See,
said her neighbour. All of you, too? Asked the woman.
Yes,
replied her neighbour solemnly.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it's every busy woman at this rate. And some men,
piped up a voice nearby. The women only swapped empty stares and drew a little closer. All at once they began to sing.
It isn't the grapefruit from the grapefruit tree, that is just a casualty. But until we can name the cause of the bother, it's good to know we have each other. See, my friend, said her neighbour, whilst it's a sad state of affairs, I can promise you one thing. You are not alone in this. Exactly that, said the shopkeeper's wife. And for now, at least that helps me breathe without all that strangeness.
And she smiled as easily as a baby might. The woman, though she was still full of a strange dread, smiled at all of them. It was the first smile she had smiled in a long time, and she noticed, as she did, that the little voice at the back of her mind seemed too preoccupied with the wind and the light and the air to comment.
Sooner or later,
whispered the neighbour,
we'll tell them all about it.
but only when we start to feel like ourselves again. Thank you for listening to another edition of 10 Tales for Tired Adults. That was The Grapefruit Tree by E. Braidwood. And you can hear more of these 10 tales by going to the playlist, listening to another linked video, or following, liking, subscribing, whatever you can do. Join me again.